Hello and welcome to Mulch, with me, your host Rebecca Anning-Brown. This is a weekly podcast for flower farmers who want to build a confident flower farming practice that reflects the lifestyle that you want now and in the future. Each week I'll share conversation and tips to nurture and grow you and your flower farm. I'll open conversations that flower farmers find difficult to talk about, provide approaches that will help you to make decisions, chuckle at the idiosyncrasies of our work, and always be real and honest about my own work as a flower farmer. My goal is to help you to grow a curious, confident and grounded flower farming practice that flourishes as a business that you love and are proud to shout about. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you like what you hear, please do leave a review and share the podcast with your flower farming friends. It really does help to grow a confident and successful flower farming community. Hello everyone, it's Rebecca from Silver Grey Foliage. This is an extra episode. So yesterday it was the Flowers from the Farm conference. It started on Friday. I wasn't able to attend on Friday, but I did go yesterday, and it gave me real food for thought. And I know that not everybody could go, so I took a lot of notes. I found the day brilliant but exhausting. And this morning I couldn't sleep because I was thinking so much about the things that happened yesterday, that I started at 5:30, and between breakfast and all things in the house, I have stopped writing my notes just now, so it's 11 o'clock. I've put a lot of thought into my notes and my summary. They are my thoughts and my take-home messages, so please do listen to other people. Look, I'm still in my pyjamas, but it is really important to me that I share this with you. My notes are written, so I'm actually going to read for the first time from notes, because I want to make sure that I get this right and that I do justice to the speakers that I heard, because for me there was real value in the conversations and in the presentations and the expertise that I heard from. Okay, before I even consider composing my thoughts, I must say an enormous thank you to the group tasked with organising this event, and also to the board of Flowers from the Farm. I attended the Saturday Day programme on Saturday, January the 25th, and it can best be described as slick. And this external appearance offers confidence to all, and especially to those of us who are not necessarily keen on large events and endless new and old friends to meet. Thank you. In a world where we watch the snippets of other flower farming businesses through the squares of social media, I was bolstered by the start and hopeful when Georgie Newberry shared her first words of wisdom as our compare and external host for the day. She said, "Never copy, but be inspired." It's a short but astute piece of advice as we seek to scale and grow the presence of smaller scale flower farmers. And it's the premise of all the work that we do through the Flower Farming Business School. It is vital that we learn. We learn in part by seeing how others do things. However, crucially, no farm will ever be the same, and so it is essential that we take all learning in the context of our own growing environment and use this to maximise our own strengths. Our host went on to give a short but relevant top line from each speaker. Firstly, David Beck of Coventry University. Consistent with my take-home message from the whole day, Georgie shared the very real concern about the absence of a substantial body of evidence to support the contribution that small-scale flower growers make. Specifically, the records do not exist to either quantify the physical availability of flowers and foliage to the industry from our small-scale growing plots, fields, whatever you want to call them, or to represent the economic contribution made in the form of tax and employment opportunities. Whilst I was absent at the time of this presentation, these are my take-home messages from what I heard. Number one, be more exact. And number two, write it down somewhere. Over the course of the day, I heard from numerous formidable and inspiring women, and so I am genuinely sad not to have heard Baroness Minette Batters speak. As the first female leader of the NFU, I know that this is a woman of knowledge and experience in the face of challenge and adversity. The impression shared is one of a fearless woman. Perhaps this is an easier authority to hold from a starting position of relative privilege. Nonetheless, the message shared from her presentation encompassed the need to open doors that appear closed, to take a seat at tables that do not appear to have a spare chair, and most importantly, to be willing to share what we know so that we can all improve and others may begin. Again, the theme of sharing is one that will return because it's important for progress. Okay? I'm really grateful to Georgia Newby for sharing succinctly her take-home messages from that first day. I scribbled pages and pages of notes as the first speaker, Rosalind Hayler, spoke. Her experience, exposure and credibility are extensive. However, if I summarise every slide, this whole podcast would be just about her speaking. If you get the opportunity to hear her, to listen to her, to see her, or to join in the work that she's doing, please take it. Here are my take-home messages from her powerful talk. Number 1, the Regado Institute exists in New Zealand to collect data and roll this into research in the viticulture industry, wine. I love wine, for the purpose of enhancing practice and protecting the industry. Enhancing practice and protecting the industry. Number 2, farmers are best placed to respond to environmental concerns and should be heeded as they work with and see the direct impact of disaster. Literally happening in front of our eyes in the grounds that we work on. Specifically, farmers are experienced and they have this thing called a learned trauma injury from previous disasters, which helps them to forecast the impact of future or impending weather impacts. So it's not just that they've experienced it, but they have the capacity to translate that into how do we make this work for us? Because that knowledge helps them to identify when, where and what to plant, right place, in order for their businesses to survive and succeed. Again, it's in the records of this valuable trauma injury that the power is held. Number 3. Okay, you may hear my son singing in the background. It's Sunday. The family are around. Number 3. Making a difference and actively generating change for the future is difficult. Perhaps even more so in cultures where what is done through experience and inherited patterns and transcends multiple historic generations who have nurtured the land in the same way. However, when it's evident that old methods are no longer effective or sustainable, change is required. The example given was of the grazing patterns of cattle in a Kenyan community. Perhaps this doesn't seem relevant on the surface to our flower farms in the UK. It doesn't feel tangible. But climate change affects the world, and how we learn from the land starts with the soil. And so perhaps we should, I don't like the word should, but perhaps we should learn from an illiterate community who are willing to embrace the soil app, so technology, in order to change what they do so that they can survive and thrive. The details of how they did it are important and fascinating. But for me, the take-home message was that they embraced something new that's available to us too, to make a difference so that they had food to eat. We all use the soil. It unifies the work that we do as farmers. Let's maybe learn from people who have less than us. Finally, I want to share the example of a Dutch grower, and I think I caught his name correctly as Vida van Veen. He's a Dutch grower, and he has members that contribute to a study programme. Each contributes data, the information from their growing spaces, what they're doing, how they're doing it, to the group's research. And they contribute money, parts of their own income, to help to fund the investments and the technologies that these Dutch growers need in order to become carbon neutral and to practice the best sustainable methods in flower growing. So the example that they're setting is not only that they need to change, but they're willing to contribute the data and collect it, hard as it may be, and that they are willing to contribute some of their income to help to make that happen. They're not asking for grants. They're not asking for people to help them or for someone else to pay. They're putting their own hands in their own pockets and contributing what they can. I think there's something for us to learn from that. It's a message of putting your money where your mouth is. Or in other words, we have to contribute. We cannot expect to be handed answers or even acknowledgement just for being present. That's a really privileged position and expectation. And the reality is that at this particular moment in time, whilst we do contribute a lot, we're the underdogs. And we have to show what our value is. If you're interested in the work that Rasheen is doing, then follow her work for the future. And my view is that we should. And if you wish to follow it, then follow her preparations as she seeks to create the British Flowers Association, an organisation for larger and smaller scale growers. Imagine how we could learn from each other. It was an incredible pleasure to hear from Kim of Marston Farm Girls. It's worth noting that having bought the Flower Farmers Planner that we wrote, Kim didn't get on with it. She stopped using it because it was too arduous to maintain. Her words. And yet, we know that records are key. Her flower farm has quadrupled in the past 4 years. I'm confident that her income surpasses many of ours, owing to the volume of high-quality flowers that she's growing. The model described is impressive. And it's satisfying the need for sustainable, high-quality flowers at volume for some of our London florists. Why am I commenting on these things and not just on the gorgeous flowers? Because they were phenomenal. Well, let me take you back to the first comments that I shared. We need records and we need tangible contribution for the state to recognise the work that we're doing. Kim knows her farm. She knows her numbers. And she will, I'm certain, expand to contribute even more to the thirst for high-quality British cut flowers, because the demand is there. However, photographs are not tangible records, and experience and sight are not accurate, and therefore we can't refer to them. My methods weren't helpful to her. I'm willing to take that. But some form of record keeping, written data that is accessible to more people, so collectible in different ways but achieving the same goal, is required in order to collect the body of evidence that we need to make any seat at any table meaningful. Secondly, the way that contribution to the state is identified is through VAT, income tax, national insurance, employees, not freelancers, employees on your PAYE payment. The pennies really speak. Kim described a model that scales down over winter to a few permanent members of staff and grows in spring and summer with the benefit of freelance work. Kim is providing jobs. And I imagine she's paying VAT. She is putting monies in the pockets of people who are willing to work. However, like many flower farmers, the reliance on freelancers who are a lower burden to us for our individual businesses means that the money that we're contributing to the economy and to jobs and all those things isn't visible and isn't getting the recognition that it deserves. Does this matter? Well, on the ground level, no, because people have money in their pockets. However, at a government level, if we truly wish to be at those tables and part of those conversations, then yes, because the contribution that we make will be seen to count and make a difference to the economy. And that's the thing that drives our state. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that the environmental impact that we offer and support isn't amazing, because it's better than amazing. But I'm saying that that's not something that they can feel and see and evidence. So what did I learn from Marston Farm Girl? I learned a lot. I learned that my definition of go big or go home is not American enough. My approach has definitely moved closer towards this as I've gained in confidence, and time, frankly. But overall, there is scope for us to grow more, and I plan to pull my big pants on and go bigger as a result of listening to and seeing what she's done. I also learned how difficult it is to understand the scope of an individual's operation without actually being present or having the insights and the numbers that Kim generously shared. I've been thinking about this in the context of our own work all night, and I'm grateful for the stimulation that Kim's offered. The third speaker of the morning was Alistair Miriam Ben. He requires no introduction. We all know that British Flowers rock, and that campaign that he's led has been simple and succinct and successful. And given that I haven't reached lunch and I'm not halfway through my thoughts and comments, I'm actually going to skip to the main points that it's unlikely you will have heard from him before. Number one, as a large-scale glasshouse grower, the costs are immense, and the supermarkets and wholesalers only want to drive down the price per stem in comparison to that of our European growers or further afield. Number two, supermarket labelling is obscure. Customers don't know what they're buying, but with education, their habits do change. Number three, the large-scale cut flower growing industry of Alstroemeria alone used to afford its own society of growers. Now, Ben struggles to buy replacement plants from within the UK. That is the size of the implosion, the decrease of the cut flower industry in the UK. Number four, water your soil to nurture your plants. Water the air to cool the environment. Okay? Soil for your plants, air for their environment. Number 5, calcium improves vase life. Potassium aids ripening. Lower pH is better for growing Alstroemeria in particular, but not too low. And number 6, Alstroemeria flower best in autumn and spring because they are cool weather plants. Lunch was yummy and offered a chance for more engaging conversation with our fellow growers. But let's move on. I'm going to speak first about the breakout session that I attended on future-proofing. The session was led by Jo Wright of Organic Blooms and Beck Bibby of Blooming Green. I have wanted to meet both of these women for a long time, and so it was brilliant to be in the room. They were asked by the room to cover the following topics: annuals, perennials, infrastructure, water, direct sowing, flooding, wind management, soil composition, nature-based solutions to plastic and feeds. I mean, the range of topics is immense. And it's astounding to say that we did touch on the vast majority of these topics in an informative and practical manner. However, as you well know, we can't cover each of those topics singly in 45 minutes. And so my summary is exactly that, and the conversation was a starter. Nevertheless, I came home with resources to search out and ideas to consider, and so I view this talk in 45 minutes to be a great success. My take-home messages. Number 1, perennials have their place. And a dry border is a concept that everyone should consider. However, and a dry border being where you have plants that once established don't need watering at all. However, just because perennials will survive the extremes doesn't mean that they'll offer you quality flowers, which is a really important concept to grasp. They may well survive, but if they're not given quality flowers, then do they really have a benefit or a place in your flower field? Yes, from diversity, but as a business, I'm less certain. And so when it comes to crop planning, the questions that we can consider are: which plants are the most needy? And from a crop diversity perspective, the more that you have in terms of variety, the more biodiversity you have. and therefore the greater the likelihood of a consistent supply. Okay, the second concept was about cover crops. They are not a new subject. It is also not something that we do much of here at Silver Grey Foliage yet. It's something that I want to do more of as part of our sustainable feed planning and also as part of our soil conservation plans. In the context of this conversation, I think one thing that really stood out to me was the importance of not covering our land for too long. I have always been taught that when you finish using a piece of land, you cover it to protect the soil from erosion. It also helps to kill off cover crops and weeds. Perfect. However, Beck shared an incredibly important reminder about soil microbes also needing light. So when we cover our land for too long, we're actually removing that light that they need to survive and to sustain the biodiversity within our soil that we're all ranting on about. As with everything, that means that there's a really fine line to be trodden between covering to protect and uncovering to preserve. And this will forever change my practice as a flower farmer. I noticed some really useful resources. I've not researched any of these yet or listened to the relevant podcasts, but I'm looking forward to, so I thought I'd share them here. The first one, or the first two actually come from the No-Till podcast as summaries. The first one being about Jadam basics, so Jadam being a form of feeding your soil from Japanese soil preservation processes. And the second being a podcast on the power of pulse watering, which came from an Australian rose grower. I've put links to both of those podcasts in the show notes, which is also available as a kind of transcript or blog on our website. The third is to seek out the Cotswold Seed Company catalogue, because not only does it tell you about the available cover crops, but it also tells you what their benefits are and how they can help your soil or your particular situation. A veritable Bible for those of us needing some help to start choosing the right cover crops for the right situations. It's also worth noting that the conversation around cuttable cover crops, for example, phacelia, lupin, clover, especially red clover, and the benefits of mixing up to 7 seed types into your cover crop mix to increase the diversity and symbiotic kind of benefits of them all working together was part of our conversation. There's so much more from this summary, but these are the final points that they've picked out. Direct sowing mixed seeds, for example, biennials, to achieve a strong, really determined crop is something that you might consider doing, both for soil preservation and also to keeping your soil covered for a longer period of time, but also to give you strength in stems and quantity. It's not something that I would consider doing because from a wholesale growing perspective, it would make it very difficult to cut. But especially if you're wanting to cut your own flowers in your fields, or you've got a bit of spare space that you want to cover that will also become useful in time, I think it's something that we could really learn from. The second was some foliage recommendations for windbreaks. So one of those being Quercus ilex, Guelder rose being another, and noting the potential also for grants for foliage planting through the Woodland Trust. Again, something for us to look into, and I'm sure that you will too. The final kind of additional note is about the use of interplanting to make full use of your beds and also to preserve soil structure. So the example given here was of planting your biennials in rows like you would do normally, and then also interplanting that with sunflowers so that all of your soil is covered, and it also provides some protection for your biennials. More importantly, when your sunflowers are done, cutting them to the bases rather than digging them up, and then being able to leave the stalks and the stems that you're not taking away with you in between your growing rows as a place for hibernation and hiding for smaller invertebrates. Genius. And so simple to do. It really was a packed and useful 45 minutes. Perhaps the most controversial session that I attended was delivered by Sel Robertson of Forever Green Flower Company. Again, I don't think she requires any introduction, but there are a few things that I would personally like to say. First of all, I love Sel. She's an incredible grower and a determined woman of substance and generous in her support and spirit. She's inspired my own determination to grow, in part fueled by a question or statement that she once offered during a conversation. I'm going to quote it because it's stuck with me. I'm concerned about whether you have the time in between other work and family commitments to do this. A genuine and realistic concern. It spurred me on to make the time to make Silver Grey Foliage happen. And yet I describe her as controversial. I'm going to summarise two, maybe three, of the elements that came up in conversation, because a number of them I think are worthy of more time, and I'll come back to them in future podcasts. Firstly, Sel referenced the factual concept that increasing production reduces the overall cost of production of our flowers. This lends itself to her honest and again factually indisputable rhetoric that the more we grow, the cheaper it is to grow, and therefore the easier it is to have a reasonably priced product in comparison to the competition. Sel's opinion, following on from this, was that the smaller the flower farm, the less viable it becomes because of the cost of production being too high. This is the part that was heard, and it's the part that I've already heard repeated. However, Sel went on to say that this applies specifically to wholesale pricing. And she went on to say that when you are on a smaller farm, less than an acre, the route to increase the value and income of your flowers is through retail. And this is how you increase income if you're at a micro flower farming level. I think it's incredibly important that we listen to and hear all of what Sel said and respond at an individual level rather than panicking after hearing the first part of the discussion and failing to hear the rest. I agree on some level with Sel. I also think that there are some creative ways around this concern for smaller micro-sized growers that require us as flower farmers to be realistic and honest about what we want to do and how we can achieve this. And for the love of God, take some records to help work out what does and does not make money and income sustainability for you personally on your flower farms. That's how you know what makes you viable, not what somebody else is saying in a presentation. If you don't have the evidence, how are you going to make your decisions? You have to do the numbers. Okay, briefly, you need a business plan. It can be on the back of an envelope to start with, but you need something so that you know what you want to achieve and what you have to do or what you want to do to try to achieve it. There needs to be a plan. Thirdly, small-scale growers need to make the distinction between wholesale and retail prices. Wholesale being when we are selling to another business who will need to also sell to make a profit. Your wholesale price in itself should be profitable, and your retail price adds to the value of your overall stem price by adding your design services. And it's making this distinction alone that I think will really increase the income and viability of smaller ventures. Because once you know the wholesale price that is already profitable, so you're not going to lose money, your retail price is above and beyond that for the additional time, skill and expertise that you're adding. And so for now, I'm going to finish my summary of sales presentation by offering a shared position that the numbers have to stack up and you have to collect some data to be able to work out what those numbers are. We have to stop guessing. We have to stop just asking around, because that's not going to give us the answers that we need or the confidence to continue putting in the work and effort to make our businesses work for us. I'm going to close my summary there. If you've listened so far, I hope that it is making you think. Write down your thoughts. Work out how you are going to act on them. I wrote the first edition of the Flower Farmers Planner 3 years ago to help flower farmers to start to collect the information that we need to make profitable businesses. It isn't easy keeping records. It's not easy for me, and it's not easy for Sel, and it's not easy for whichever other farm there is. But if we don't collect some information about what we're sowing, what we're growing, how much we're cutting, how much we're wasting, how much we're spending, it's impossible for us to make our businesses work. It takes time. The more you document, the easier it gets. And yes, there will be patches where you don't do anything, but doing something and starting is better than doing nothing and saying it's just not worth the effort. It's available to order on our website. Secondly, until the 1st of February, the Flower Farming Business School online is available to join again for the rest of 2025 for the price of 2.5 quarters of the year's memberships. The way that it usually works is you pay for a whole quarter or you pay for the year, which is 4 quarters. And when you pay for 4 quarters, then we only ask you to pay the price of 3.5. Okay? So far, we have done business planning your quarter, making sure that your growing aligns with your business plan, and seed scheduling. There are 17 videos, 6 downloads, and it's deliberately pitched at a level to get people going with the right habits. It is not dumbed down, but you can take or leave as much of it as you want, because it will at least get you thinking and writing in a way that's going to make your business more business-like. It's there to help you. The next opportunity to join after the 1st of February will be the start of quarter 2, which is just before the start of April. Pricing-wise, the pricing will be back to usual at that point, so you'll either pay for 1 quarter or you'll pay for 3.5 out of 4 to receive the annual membership. As a businesswoman, which is what I am as a flower farm owner, I'm going to point something out to you. I know that the content is good, partly because I wrote it, and partly because people are telling me how it's helping them and how it's changing how they think. And so the price will keep going up as the content keeps increasing and that reputation sets itself further, until it reaches a point where I consider that I'm being reimbursed at an appropriate level for the work that I'm contributing. And so my advice to you is join now and pay less. As a businesswoman, that seems to make some sense to me. I can't finish this review without referring to the topic of equality and diversity. I wasn't present to hear the scholars speak on Friday night. However, I did speak to a number of the diversity and inclusion scholars of Flowers from the Farm on Saturday during the day. Equality and diversity is not a topic that I often reference. I find it difficult. And in particular, as a black female, my lived experiences go beyond anything that can be pinned down to a verbalised or written commitment to increase access for ethnically and socially diverse groups. Such commitments make me uncomfortable because their very utterance misses the complexity and the challenge. Before I left, I spoke to Jennifer, one of the scholars, and she said that as part of her speech, she had verbalised a need for people like her to be able to see people like her doing the work in order to know that there is a potential and opportunity to do the same. It's a sobering comment. I know that I do what I can to be visible. However, as a minority within the organisation of Flowers from the Farm, by a long way, and owing to the success of our business being towards my education rather than to access through any other means, I consider the scope of the challenge to have been greatly underestimated. My response to Flowers from the Farm is that where the wish to increase access, and not just in the form of a potential workforce, is genuine, is that the professionalism of our small-scale cut flower growers must strengthen. It must. I know that's a difficult way to end this podcast, but it's important that it's heard, and for once I'm going to take the opportunity to share those thoughts. Thank you for listening. These are my thoughts and my take-home messages from the Flowers from the Farm conference in 2025. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your responses. You can put your responses in the comments. You can put your responses in an email to me. My email is rebecca@silvergreyfoliage.com. You can send me a message on Instagram. I would love it if you took a moment to share my thoughts in your stories and in your social media posts so that other people who weren't able to attend can share this food for thought too. Consider it your task for the day. In the meantime, I'll be back on Thursday with another episode about flower farming and practice. Rebecca.